This episode is about a prolific poisoner and serial killer by the name of Martha Needle. At first glance, she was a loving mother and devoted housewife, but she had an evil secret. She carefully and systematically poisoned her entire family, while seemingly devoted to her stricken loved ones as they painfully wilted away at her hands, earning herself the title of one of the world's worst murderers. Her infamy was only rivalled by her contemporary Ned Kelly, whose story still looms large in the Australian psyche, while her shocking crimes have all been but forgotten. She had collected substantial sums of insurance money, but her exact motive for committing murder has never been fully determined, and several times she stated that she was completely innocent. Despite this, she was brought to justice when the disturbing details of her actions came to light. This is Vintage Murders and the Menacing Martha Needle. She was born Martha Charles on the 9th of April 1863 in the small rural town of Morgan in South Australia. Her parents, Joseph Charles and his wife Mary, separated 7 months before Martha was born. Her father died when she was quite young. When the child was 2, her mother remarried 39-year-old Daniel Foran. They were poor and lived in a small 2-room house in North Adelaide. Police reports from the time suggest an impoverished and unhappy childhood, marred by violence and abuse. Martha's mother was an alcoholic who had convictions for drunkenness, indecent language, and willful damage. One of Martha's neighbours later gave evidence that her mother used to beat her pretty severely at times and had seen the child being hit with a stick. Her mother also used to tie her up and hit her with a rope. Martha's stepfather was worse. In April 1876, he was jailed for sexually assaulting Martha, then aged only 11. The South Australian Advertiser reported that her stepfather was charged with indecently assaulting his stepdaughter, Martha Charles, at Adelaide in December 1875, and found guilty. The judge alluded to the enormity of the crime of which the prisoner had been found guilty, and sentenced him to the full term allowed by the law, which was 2 years hard labour. She left home at 13 and started working as a housekeeper, and married carpenter Henry Needle in 1882 when she was 18. He was 5 years older than she was, and the marriage seemed to be a happy one. The couple moved to Sydney so that Henry could find work, and it was here that their first child Mabel was born in November 1882. In October 1884, Martha's second child, Elsie, was born, and around 1885 the couple left for Melbourne and settled in Richmond, where Henry found work that brought in a good income. They had a third child by the name of May that year. But after the move, the relationship between Martha and Henry went downhill. She was an attractive woman, it was said, and she enjoyed the company of men. By contrast, her husband was a shy, jealous man who often hit her. Towards the end of 1885, their eldest daughter Mabel got sick, suffering from fever, vomiting, and spasms of the stomach. She died on the 28th of December 1885. Martha said that she simply seemed to fade. There was no suspicion surrounding her death. The doctor, Frederick Elsner, certified that the 3-year-old had died from a cerebral tumour and respiratory and cardiac bronchitis. After Mabel's death, Henry could not find work locally and had to travel to Sydney, where he would stay for several months. A newspaper later reported that Martha began to go out at night alone, and that she had become renowned locally for having what was termed as a flighty disposition, fond of company, and with a weakness for the aberration of the sterner sex, which was invariably accorded to her. Martha's husband became increasingly jealous and morose, and in 1889 he suddenly fell ill. His doctor, George Hodson, recalled that Henry had been a robust man, but was now suffering from acute vomiting. His behaviour was also noted as strange. On one visit, the doctor observed that Henry had left untouched some chicken broth and jelly that Martha had served him. He died on the 4th of October 1889, with Martha by his side. The official cause of death was subacute hepatitis, persistent vomiting, enteric fever, and exhaustion due to not taking nourishment. Despite the mysterious nature and sudden onset of the illness, no post-mortem was performed, and no suspicion was attached to Martha, who seemed to give him devoted care. About a year after Henry's death, 6-year-old Elsie began to fall ill. In the courtroom later, her doctor recalled that he thought Elsie was suffering from measles, but he did remember the young child had been vomiting. He told the court that Martha had never appeared inattentive or unkind, and had never obstructed his visits. Elsie suffered for almost 2 months, finally passing away on the 9th of December 1890. Only 7 months after the death of her oldest sister, 4-year-old May's health also deteriorated. The previously healthy child began to display peculiar and worrying symptoms. The most notable was constantly vomiting. The little girl died in August 1891. Her death certificate listed tubercular meningitis as the cause, but her doctor later testified, "The case attracted my attention particularly. I was always puzzled by the case. I could not arrive at a diagnosis satisfactory to myself." Martha Needle's care of her daughter was not questioned. In fact, she was praised. Daughter Mabel had died after a short illness, and Needle said at the time that she seemed to fade, and later collected £100 life insurance. On Mabel's death, Henry Needle, who was insured for £200, died of a mysterious illness in 1889, followed by Elsie and May in 1890. Needle spent almost all the insurance money on an elaborate family grave, which she visited regularly. After May's death, Needle moved to Richmond and met Louis Junkin, a friend from Adelaide, who operated a saddlery business with his brother Otto at 137 Bridge Road, Richmond, and in 1891 Needle sublet the attached house and took in lodgers. She began an affair with Otto in 1893, but Louis and his other brother Herman disapproved and attempted to prevent their relationship. During this time, Needle's behaviour began to cause concern. She would become unresponsive or rigid for long periods, and on at least one occasion she went out to search for her dead children. Not surprisingly, Louis became concerned and opposed any engagement. The following year, Louis became ill with strange symptoms: vomiting, a sore mouth and gums, and a sore tongue. He died on the 15th of May of suspected typhoid. In June 1894, Herman travelled to Melbourne from Adelaide to handle his late brother's affairs. He ate a meal prepared by Needle and suddenly became ill. He recovered, but became ill again the next day after eating breakfast. 2 days later, Herman had fully recovered, but while eating lunch prepared by Needle, he was seized by painful violent cramps. Puzzled by Herman's symptoms, his doctor arranged for an analysis of the vomit. It revealed arsenic coloured by charcoal, similar to the constituents of a popular rat poison, rough on rats. The doctor informed the police of his suspicions, and a trap was set. After Herman's recovery, police hid outside the house as Herman went in to have some tea. Within minutes, Needle was caught in the very act of offering a cup of tea containing 10 grains of arsenic. After being served the tea, Herman literally blew the whistle, summoning detectives who arrived as Needle was struggling with Herman to upset the teacup onto the floor, which was found to contain enough arsenic to kill 5 people. A box of rough-on rats was found in the cupboard. Louis's body was quickly exhumed and found to contain 3.4 grains of arsenic. 2 grains were enough to kill. Needle was charged with attempted murder. The bodies of Henry Needle and the 3 girls were also exhumed. All the bodies were found to contain fatal levels of arsenic, and Needle was also charged with the murder of Louis Junkin. The trial lasted 3 days. She was tried in September 1894 for murder. She pleaded not guilty on all charges. In her defence, her counsel attempted to argue that Martha's long periods of unconsciousness meant that she was not responsible for her actions. The murder of her children seemed especially inconsistent with her apparent behaviour as a fond mother. But doctors called to give evidence were reluctant to commit themselves, and Justice Hodges rejected a plea of insanity, observing, "The law cannot wait while philosophers, physicians and scientists settle metaphysical problems. Justice must be swift and sure." The jury found Martha Needle guilty and gave no recommendation to mercy, and she was sentenced to death by hanging. A few days after Martha's trial had ended, lawyer Marshall Lyall wrote to the governor, the Earl of Hoptown, on behalf of the Victorian branch of the Howard Association for the Prevention of Crime. Lyall conceded Needle had committed acts that were utterly revolting and opposed to the natural instincts of women. She had murdered children whom she had loved very much and treated affectionately. But he argued it was only rational to assume that when a kind mother murders her children, she is insane. Lyall claimed that criminal administrations in the past had been stained with the burning and killing of thousands of women, whom succeeding generations have recognized as insane. Even in Victoria, we are punishing annually in our prisons a much larger number of insane persons than are officially recognized as such. Lyall advocated for a proper scientific inquiry of Needle's case. Rather than the Crown's use of incompetent medical men, he questioned the prison doctor's test of Needle's sanity, which consisted of a cross-examination into her knowledge of the 10 Commandments of Moses. Scandals of this character ought to be avoided in the future, he warned. Lord Hoptown referred the letter to the government. Attorney General Isaac Isaacs replied, "As the prisoner was defended by able counsel, and as this petition does not disclose any facts which would show that the woman was insane, I do not see any reason to recommend the request be complied with." During her time in prison, Needle received continued visits from her friends. In her final letter to a Mrs. Owen, she writes, "Try not to grieve too much for me." She was executed at Melbourne Prison at 8 a.m. on the 22nd of October 1894. When asked for her last words, she replied, "I have nothing to say." She left all her belongings to Otto, who supported her to the end. She was 31 years old. On the 15th of July 1920, Alexander Lee, the son of Needle's older sister Ellen, was hanged at Adelaide Prison for the murder of his wife Muriel, who had been poisoned with strychnine. During the years of the Depression, The city council built bluestone walls to protect local beaches from erosion. The stones were taken from the outer walls of the old Melbourne prison and included the headstones with initials and dates of execution of all those executed and buried in the grounds. Although most of the stones were placed with the engravings facing inwards, Needle's stone was faced outwards, and the initials MN and the date are still clearly visible.